Okay, so first of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So we are holding in the book, if anybody wants the book and doesn't have it, please feel free. I still have some, and I see it's coming up backwards, so I'm going to put it like
Oh.
backwards. All right. I'm going to have to change my settings from mirror. I'm not going to do that right now. But as long as my face is not coming up backwards, that's the main thing.
It looks fine to us.
Oh, thank you. So if anybody needs the book and hasn't had it, please just let me know and come by and get it. So we are on page 160, day 50. We're in a segment of the book as a part of the book, and there's different chapters dealing with not necessarily only dealing with when there's sort of a halakhic problem or a halakhic question that you have, right? Either dealing with Beis Din, the Jewish courthouse, right, or personal, and what are you allowed to say? What are you not allowed to say, right? And these are very tricky questions, and sometimes, and not sometimes, every situation makes a difference regarding the case. So I want to talk about this case because this case, I think, is something that might come up more often than not, right? Might come up the next two cases. If we have a chance to speak about the next one this week, that'll be great. It doesn't sound like someone would really ever think that this might be applicable to them, but the idea, I think, is something that comes up often. And the the scenario that they give is like this, right? You have a tenant, right? You're an owner of a home, you're an owner of properties, you have a tenant, right? Recently he's moving out, right? And owes you a month's rent, right? Now he says the money, right, is his because he paid to fix the plumbing problems or whatever it is, right? And that that's where sort of it's something that might be often, I fixed this for you, I upgraded, I put in pavers, I put in this, right? And I didn't say anything, but you know what? I'm moving out. I'm not going to pay you the last month then. So if you really add up everything, right? What page? Page 160. So if you really add everything, it sort of equals up. So that's what he says, right? You disagree, right? That that he was responsible for that, whatever the reason is. So what do you guys decide? You ask him to sell the matter with you and Beis Din. Right? And he said, but in his eyes, there is no issue, right? So you go ahead and say, you know what? Let's go to Beis Din. Let's go to a Jewish courthouse, right? We resolve our things in-house. That's what money, as we mentioned before, money issues and marriage and things like that, we deal with in Jewish courthouses, which is preferable, right? Lo and behold, what happens? Okay, he agrees, right? And then he says, the money is mine, fair and square, and there's no issue, and I refuse to go, right? He says, I refuse to go. So now the question's like this, right? He refuses to go to a Beis Din, right? Now you theoretically could go ahead and again, this is not our discussion, but I just want to bring it up. If you want to then go to secular court, you should speak to a rabbi first, right? Because there are different things that we could do with arbitration and things like that. And we always try to avoid, especially if you're dealing with another Jew, especially if you're dealing with another Jew, we try to avoid going to secular courthouses, because Jewish law has a different view, different way of dealing with a lot of times in the secular courthouses with. And at the end of the day, right, if you're losing a lot of money or whatever it is, of course, we go to secular courthouses, right? But it should be done with a consultation of a rabbi, a competent rabbi in these laws regarding to do that. That's not our discussion. It's a very complicated discussion, but I just wanted to sort of put it out there that we're not saying that we don't go to secular courthouses, and we're not saying that that's the first place you should. Every situation is a discussion within itself. But now, what do you want to do? You want to go ahead, right? May you tell people that he refused to come before Beis Din as ways of pressuring him to behave in accordance with the Torah standards of settling the dispute. Right? So what you want to do is, right? It's again from the perspective of the person, right, that doesn't want to go, right? The halakha is that you should go, right? If someone wants to go with you to Jewish Beis Din, a Jewish courthouse, That's the way you're supposed to go. That's the halacha. That's what you're supposed to do, right? So are you allowed to go ahead and say, hey, listen, at Kiddush, or to tell people, or post it on a WhatsApp group, or not WhatsApp group, but on a Facebook group, or on your Facebook page, or whatever it is, right? I've been dealing with this guy, and I've asked him to go to Beis, he doesn't want to, right? Could you do that, or you cannot do that, right? Because it is a form of sort of pressuring him. If his friends who all would go, or, his colleagues, his neighbors, like, what, you're not going to Beis? Like, why not? If you're right, so they'll rule it. If not, like, okay, so that's the ruling. Like, why are you not going to Beis? Right? So sort of a peer pressure kind of tactic. Are you allowed to do that or not? So what do you guys think? Any thoughts?
Oh, no.
Quiet. Bonnie? Any thoughts, Bonnie? No, Cindy, any thoughts? Okay, Emily,
All right.
thoughts?
I mean, I think
Wait,
it's like, oh, no, go ahead.
Go ahead, Cindy.
I couldn't get to my phone again. I think that, yeah, you can pressure. I think that you can say something. Other people can say what they think. Yes.
Okay, why
That's
do
my
you
opinion.
say that? Just because you feel that that's the right thing, or
Well,
logic?
just
I mean, and there's
say-
nothing wrong with feelings. I'm just asking.
I mean, I just know, like, because of my life situation, and in Facebook groups where people aren't giving gets and things like that, people pressure them. They give them pressure to give a get. I'm just thinking it's similar to that,
Okay, so you're saying that
where you're allowed.
pressure, we see that there is a legitimacy sometimes of using pressure, right? The question that we're posing is, who has the right to give that pressure? That's sort of, I just tweak a little bit.
Okay.
And so are you still standing that the defendant, or whatever it is, the owner of the house, and has the right to give that pressure, or are you going to rethink it, or are you staying with that? What are your thoughts?
I'll rethink it.
You don't have to. No, what pressuring you?
No,
over here?
I know.
No pun intended. Okay, Emily, what are you?
You're not.
No, it's so funny because I was just thinking also about the Aguna situation, where there's like, sometimes these people will do public things, and it seems like it, in my understanding, is the Aguna thing is like a totally different category that doesn't necessarily apply to other legal issues. But I think this seems like a private issue. The person should just like go to a rabbi about it. I don't understand, like, why. I can't understand why this would possibly be something that you could speak to other people.
Okay,
Like, what would be?
Cindy, do you want to respond to Emily? Or we're going to wait for Cindy to get to her phone?
If we could, yeah, I think that, I don't know. I have to think about it.
Okay,
I always have
cool.
a gut thought, and then I'm like,
Gut
maybe that's not
thoughts,
the right
gut thoughts are very good. Anybody else want to weigh in on this? Okay,
I would agree with Emily.
you will agree with Emily. Okay, Emily, you got someone on your side. What do you think?
No, I know that there's like, I was at someone's house recently, like a few Shabbases ago, not in Florida, but the person works with people who are gunas, and the husband won't give a get. And they were telling me that one of the tactics they use is put a big picture in the subways in New York, where the guy would go to work. They would put a huge picture of his face and said, Avram Yankel, whatever, won't give his wife a get. So it's like, it seems to be like that, that situation seems to have its own separate rules, like apart from just like any other sort of legal issue.
Okay, so let's elaborate on this a little bit. Okay, so the number one, there's 2 points that we have to make over here. Number one, you're right. Every situation is different, right? And what I mean, every situation is not necessarily in one case, but different cases and halacha have different tactics of how to deal with it. Right, and that's why we have to know what the halacha is, what you're allowed to do. Before we get to what Emily brought up with agunas, which is a very complicated and unfortunately heart-wrenching discussion to talk about, right? Let's just first see what the halacha is over here, and then we'll sort of tie that back in, okay? So the halacha says, right? That assuming that he's merely mistaken on his belief that he's entitled to the money without any question, he's still considered a amisecha, a fellow of your Jewish nation, right? And the halacha is, as we said, the bottom line of talking negative or spreading something, or even sometimes for benefit, right, is that you're not allowed to talk or peddle information, right? A rachel is a peddler. You're not allowed to peddle information about your brethren, about someone from who we are, right? And therefore, you are not permitted to embarrass him. You're not permitted to embarrass him now, right? You could speak to someone who might be able to influence him, but this must be done without causing him shame. Here's a caveat, my friends. Right? Only Beis Din, right, has the right, if someone ignores Beis Din, what you could do is you could go to Beis Din and say, hey, listen, this is my problem. Can you please summon him? Right? What happened over here, and this is why it's so important, what happened over here is you asked for him to come to Beis Din with you. Beis Din never issued a decree, right, that this person is being called to Beis Din, and now this guy's ignoring Beis Din. Right? It's very different. Right? As we said, every situation is different. This person over here, let's call him Ruvain, asked Shimon, right, to come with him to Beis Din. Now, he doesn't want to do that, right? So now you want to know if you could tell, hey, Shimon doesn't want to come with me to Beis Din, right? And that's going to embarrass him, right? And maybe it'll pressure him to do that. Now you're not allowed to do, because you, as an individual, have the right to go to Beis Din, but you still don't have the right to embarrass another person. Once Beis Din summons him, let's say you go and you show what you had, and now Beis Din summons him to Beis Din, right? Now the whole situation is different. You're still not allowed to do it, but Beis Din has the right. And we talked about this previously, and these halachas are very complicated, and we're not going to go into it, right? The right of a Beis Din, it's like a courthouse. They have certain ways of influencing their law and making sure that their law, and one of those ways is either excommunicating someone or putting out pamphlets or things like that, or making notice that this person is now not listening to Beis Din, because it's more than just this individual. He's ignoring the Beis Din, which is our court system, which is our law and order, right? And now this person is defying our law and order. So by doing that in himself, he's saying like, I don't need this, right? The Beis Din doesn't count, or even if he's not saying that, right? But that's what's impression, and other people will be influenced, and therefore Beis Din has the right to go ahead and publicize that this person has refused to come to Beis Din, right? And that is, again, there's the whole section of Code of Jewish Law and halacha regarding how to do it and what's the proper way to do it, and Beis Din has to use their seichel, their logic, when to do it. You have to know the individual, and is it going to make a difference or is it not going to make a difference, right? And there's a lot of details that go into it, right? But in the practical checklist, Beis Din has the right to do that. But as an individual, you don't have the right to do that. You don't have the right to embarrass a person just because he doesn't want to come with you to Beis Din, right? Now, just since Emily brought up agunos, right? As I said, it's a very heart-wrenching scenario. Maimonides says, right? Maimonides, right? Already in the 1200s, 13th century, Maimonides lived. And just to show, that the importance of making sure that a woman has her freedom, right? Maimonides quotes, and it's really passed from the Talmud, that Beis Din is allowed to kofimos, they're allowed to force him, right, to give a get, right? If the woman wants a get, for whatever reason in halacha, right, and we're not going to get into that, right, and it's a complicated halacha, right? A man has to give a get, right, and a woman has to receive a get from a man, right? And I don't want to get into that right now. It's a complicated halacha, right? But that is the law, and some halachas we don't understand, but we believe. Right? We just had last week's Torah portions, Parshas Chukas, right? Parshas Chukas means to say the parsha of laws that God gave us we not necessarily understand, but we believe that, of course, is a rhyme and reason, right? And God is testing us. Part of the halacha, part of what we're supposed to learn from it, to see if we're going to follow God's ruling and laws, even if God did not give us the explanation for it, right? So there are those halachas that we not necessarily could comprehend, but that is testing our faith. But being that aside, right, the Beis Din, not any individual, right? Beis Din has the right to go ahead to pressure the person, and it's primarily done with that good intent because it's affecting someone else's life, right? It's affecting someone else's freedom, right? And this is brought down in halakha. Beis Din has the right to go ahead and pressure, and there's many different ways of pressuring, and unfortunately, some of those ways are not legal in our days. Not saying that that's unfortunate; they're not legal in our days, and therefore Beis Din also has to be careful. Just because halakhically they have the right doesn't mean to say they won't get in trouble legally, right? And that's why there was unfortunately this whole stint in New York, right? And I don't want to get into that either, right? What was right and wrong, I'm not here to decide what's right and wrong, right? But Beis Din has different ways. And one of those tactics is putting up these big billboards, right? Making people aware, sort of pressuring the person, right? To excommunicating him or things like that, pressuring the person to go ahead and give his wife a divorce. And Beis Din has the right to do that. Yes, there's organizations that work with Beis Din. If you have an organization or an individual takes it upon themselves, they're not doing the right thing, right? Just because you think that you're doing something righteous, right, doesn't mean to say that it's the right thing. Doesn't mean to say it's the right thing. Doesn't mean to say you're doing it in the right way. And it's a very important, as we're all familiar with it, the path to hell is paved with good intentions, right? We're all familiar with that. Now, you have to work within the confines of halakha, of Jewish law, right? So you have to work with Beis Din. You can't just take things upon yourself. When we're talking about this, we have to understand that there's certain things that we just can't comprehend, either in general or sometimes in different times of different generations. There's certain things that are just harder for us to comprehend. And we have to say, I believe in God, and I believe that God knows better than us what's right and wrong, why he tells us to do things. Yeah, we have to work with that. We have to have that faith, but at the same time, utilize the halakha and that God gave us, right? And therefore, these different organizations have to be working with a Beis Din, but we have ways of pressuring people. And it's not only in that case. There are many other cases. A lot of times people that do defy Beis Din, that they said, oh, no, I'm not going to work with Beis Din, right? Beis Din, if they assess a situation and whatever it is, they made the decision, they're going to put out things in the city, right? In the Jewish community, whatever it is that, this person is defying Beis Din and not listening to Beis Din, right? In the secular courts, they have it. If you don't come to court, right, they'll send the sheriffs after you, right? But right now we're living in exile, right? And we don't have that ability to do that, right? So therefore, halakha gives us other means of pressuring, right? But this is something that's done in the secular courts also. Imagine you have a dispute with an individual and you decide to take it into your own hands, or you're going to go ahead and drag the person and cuff him and bring him to court. You're the one that's going to get arrested, right? The court might say, okay, now we have him here, but you'll also get in trouble because you are an individual and it has to be worked through the court and through the system, right? Same way we understand that in the secular courts, same thing with the Jewish courts, right? We just have different means because we are in exile. We don't have a police force, right? And we're not allowed in halakha to also, when we're in exile, we're not allowed to do things in certain ways, but we do have what we're allowed to do. So an individual can go ahead and do something where Beis Din is allowed, right? The same way it's in the secular courts that way also. Any questions or comments? Wow.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have a question. Hi, Rabbi, this is Judy Hennig. How are you?
Hi, Judy. Oh my gosh, nice to have you on.
Thank you. So my question is like this. If you have such a person, Plony, and he was obviously summoned to the Beis Din, and he came to Beis Din, so he's a religious person, so then he's going to listen to the rabbis, and he wants to be part of a religious community, so he's going to do what he's supposed to do to be in that religious community. Otherwise, they'll excommunicate him, etc., etc.
Okay.
So then why did he go ahead and not listen to the Beis Din that he submitted himself to and then they have to take these drastic measures. Like,
So
what is this?
so you want to know human nature. Human nature is one of the most complicated things that one could deal with, right? And it's a good question, right? But human nature is one of the most complicated things that we deal with. And a lot of times someone wants to do the right thing, but then you know, it's either too much for him, or he doesn't like the ruling rubs him the wrong way, right? Or there could be a variety of different things of why the person feels that he feels he's been misjudged, or or they didn't have all the facts, or Basin didn't do it, whatever it is, right? Right? It's part of human nature, and I can't answer for every situation, right? But human nature, unfortunately, is that we're willing to start the process, but when the end results come and we're not happy with it, right? We react. Different people react in different ways, right? I can't tell you why every situation, why someone reacts in a certain way, but typically it's because it rubs the person the wrong way, or it affects the person in a hardship that he feels that is unjustified, or something that he won't be able to do, or whatever it is, right? And therefore, the person reacts in the wrong way. And let's not forget that every individual, every one of us has an evil inclination, and the evil inclination is constantly the Yetzer Hara. And the evil inclination is constantly attacking us and looking for holes, right, in our defense, right, and exploiting our weaknesses. And in a situation where someone feels that he was wronged, right, or he's going to go through a real hardship, right, evil inclination starts putting in a lot of things in our heads, and a lot of them sometimes is that he even makes us feel like we're the ones that are doing the right thing by not doing the right thing, right? Look at Korach, right? A couple of weeks ago, right? Korach was carrying the ark from one of the holiest people, right? But he felt wronged, and he went ahead and he rebelled against Moshe, right? So it's a complicated and a complicated question, in the sense of we don't know human nature. What we do know is that we don't know human nature, right? And we know also that we have an evil inclination, and the evil inclination is constantly looking to poke holes at our strengths. And part of those poking holes, a lot of times, is he makes us feel like we are actually doing the right thing, right? But it's a good question, good point. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so I want to talk about this. What's it called? Then I want to talk about this quote. Look at the page 161. Michtav Eliyahu. One must seek far-fetched justification for his friend's action, just as he would for himself. If he fails to do so, it is because he does not love his fellow as himself. Right? So we're sort of, as we said, that was a halacha. Now we have to get into some hashkafa. Right? One of the reasons, we do speak lashon hara, whatever that may be. Right? There's many reasons why we speak lashon hara. So many times we don't even realize we're speaking lashon hara. Over here we're sort of talking because the person thinks that he's doing the right thing by the person's not doing a mitzvah, or that someone did something wrong, or it's just you've seen someone do something, right? You saw someone, you're driving somewhere and you saw someone walk into a store, and how could that person walk into that store, right? Whatever reason, wherever we're holding, that store is not a store that you think this person should walk into, right? If it's someone that keeps kosher, it was a non-kosher restaurant. If it's someone that, it was someone that only eats, doesn't eat meat out, it was a non-kosher meat restaurant. If there's other stores that someone might, you don't think it's appropriate for the person to walk into there, right? There's always something, right? And you saw that person walking in there, right? So, you think it's your duty to let people know, right? Because, hey, this person thinks he's whatever, and look, he walked into that place, right? Or, of course not, but you're at Kiddush and you just get that urge, what that person did, right? Could be it was like one-time thing, but you know what that person did, right? You even already start putting like a little, maybe it was just a one-time thing, he couldn't control himself or whatever it is. You even put those things in there, but you go ahead and talk. But what's the bottom line? You think the person did something wrong, my friends, right? We're only saying something because we think the person did something wrong. If we don't think, we're not going to go around and say, oh my gosh, you saw if Feigenbaum walked into Publix, right? He walked out with a carton of milk. You saw that? Can't believe it. I can't believe it. Right? Of course, you're not going to hock at Kiddush, right, or at a table, right, or post about that, right? Because there's nothing wrong with doing that. I mean, last I checked. I mean, I hope, right? But there's nothing wrong with doing that, right? So the only reason why we sort of either have the urge or we feel that we need to, and is because either what we saw or what we heard from someone else, we are making the assumption that it was a wrong thing, either a terribly wrong thing or a small wrong thing. But there was something fishy going on there, right? Something fishy going on there. And that's what Michtav Leo is telling us. Pirkei Avos, ethics of our father, tells us, teaches us, and we've said this many times, it brings it out so beautifully. Havadan is called Adam l'kavskos. We have to judge every person favorably, right? And there's another one says, right? Judge a fellow like you like to be judged yourself. Right? Don't judge someone like you love you, or love your neighbor, right? V'hafta l'reacha kamocha. That's a verse in the Torah, right? Love your neighbor, v'hafta l'reacha. Love your friend, right? As yourself, right? So he says like this. He's taking that and saying that when we judge someone, when we don't find a favorable way of explaining something. We saw someone walk into a strip club, God forbid, right? There's no kids on, right? Right? We saw someone walking in there, and I said, "Oh my gosh, how can you?" Maybe the guy really needed to use a bath. Maybe who knows what? Something happened, and he needed to. Not saying it's the right thing or wrong thing, right? That's not what I'm saying. But if we don't make the assumption, right, that that's what he went in there for, right? Probably better not to, right? But for whatever reason, right? Maybe he knew someone was in there and he was going to save them and he's going to help them out. And he was the only one that could get this person out of there. Who knows? And you leave and you don't see him walking out with the other person 10 minutes later, right? It sounds far-fetched, but wouldn't you want someone to judge you favorably, to find that far-fetched reason of why you did something? And therefore, says Michtav Leo, right, that falls under the lack of the mitzvah, a positive commandment. It's not just a song that we sing, right? V'hafta l'reacha kamocha, right? And I'm not going to sing it to you, right? It's not just a song, right? It's a positive commandment in the Torah, right? V'hafta l'reacha kamocha. You should love your friend, right? Your neighbor, right? Your colleagues as yourself. And that positive commandment, part of that is that the same way you would want someone to judge you favorably, right? Even a far-fetched reason, you have to start doing that to other people. And if you start doing that, then that whole urge or the whole feeling of the necessary to let people know, well, look what that person did, falls apart. Because as we said, we don't tell people, oh, we saw that person walking into Publix, right? Or Walmart or whatever. Because there's nothing wrong with that. Oh my gosh, I saw the person taking in his garbage today. Okay, good for him. He did the right thing, right? So therefore, also, since if we train ourselves to start realizing that because of the positive commandment, v'hafta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself, right? You have to go ahead and find the far-fetched reason. And we spoke about different things. It doesn't mean to say you should be ignorant. It doesn't mean to say that you shouldn't take care of things. Maybe go ahead and speak to someone, try to approach the person. Right? And we're on day 50. Right? We spoke about different scenarios, right? Go ahead and speak to someone confident and say, hey, just FYI, just curious, there's ways of dealing with things. But that urge to go ahead and tell people comes from because you think the person did something wrong. And we have a positive commandment to judge your neighbor favorably, and there's a lack of positive commandment of loving your neighbor as yourself if you can't find that far-fetched reason. All right, that I think, my friends, is something that is extremely powerful that we have to think about, and just along those same lines, and we'll end with this idea, right? If you look at the top part, the paragraph from Rav Moshe Feinstein, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but Rav Moshe Feinstein tells us that we learn from Avram Avinu, Abraham, our forefather, right? We learn from Avram Avinu that we have an obligation, right? Not only not to speak evil about people, right? Again, as individuals where we're not allowed to, of course, there's scenarios where you have to say something, right? Right? But as individuals, we're not allowed to. But not only that, we learned from Avram Avinu that Avram Avinu went ahead and prayed for them, right? Avram Avinu teaches the right attitude towards those who don't live up to our ideals. He prayed for the welfare of the people of Sodom. Right? When God told Avram Avinu that he's going to wipe out Sodom, what did he do? He didn't say, oh, good. I don't have to worry about those people anymore. All right? Wow, at least we got some evil off the ground. Right? What did Avram Avinu do? He went ahead and he prayed for them. He said, oh, maybe there's 50 righteous people. Maybe there's 45 righteous people. He had a whole back and forth. And we actually take part of that, the conversation, and we actually put it into our services on the high holidays. You know that? Part of that service, some of the quotes that Avram Avinu speaks to God, right? Lama, why should you put an evil with the righteous with the evil? And it's been inserted into our prayer. And Avram Avinu goes ahead and he prays for them. And he prays for their welfare. Can you imagine if we knew there was a cluster of evildoers, right? Child molesters and people that sell children to slavery. From the worst of the worst. Killers. They've been given chances. Right? But they're just go ahead. You know what the people of Sodom did? They took a girl, a lady that gave shelter to a stranger. And they put honey on her and sent out bees. And she died from stinging of bees. You know what kind of torture that is? We would say, good riddance. Good job. All right? Tornado wiped out that colony. Wow. What did Avram Avinu do? He goes ahead and prays for them. Right? So we have to learn from Avram Avinu. All right, we have to go ahead and learn from Avram Avinu. And as he finishes, the more elevated a person is, the less likely he is to think to speak Lashon Hara. If we find that because of the idolism, we think properly of others. And Avram Avinu, even him, he tried to find, maybe there was 10, maybe it was 5. At the end of the day, God said no. So he said, okay, what could I do? I tried. And my friends, that is the attitude that we have to have. Doesn't mean to say that people don't get punished. Of course, we have punishment in our Jewish courts, right? And we have to, as rabbis and as community leaders and as parents, we have to discipline. And yes, rabbis sometimes have to call out certain actions in the community, and we'll say that's not a right action, right? It should never come to it, but if sometimes it has to even be called out, an individual, rabbi has to speak to other colleagues and make sure that he's doing the right thing. But if that person is influencing other people in the wrong way or whatever it is, right? In the extreme case, yes, of course we have to make sure that we're following the right ways and we're making sure that our congregants and our community is not being influenced in the wrong way, and our children are not, and our school system has discipline. But at the same time, our attitude has to be to judge every person favorably. Our attitude has to be that we pray for them. I'm going to end with one story that the Talmud says, right? The Talmud tells us I don't remember the names of the individuals. It's been a little while since I've seen it, right? But the Talmud tells us that there was a certain rabbi, right, that was living next to someone that was driving them insane, literally insane. And I'm sure we all, have experienced this a little bit. One of those neighbors that drives you insane. But this was literally every time the person did something, he literally drove him insane. Right, so he went to one of the his rabbi, right, and he said, "Can I pray that this person, should disappear?" Right, let's put it nicely, right? Can I pray? Can I do that? So the rabbi told him, right, he says, "Why don't you pray that the person repents? Pray instead that the person repents." And he did that. It says after a while, the person changed his ways, right? And became a better person. That is the attitude that we have to have. That even those that are driving us crazy doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't put a fence around our house. It doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't get security. And it doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't have police around protecting us. It doesn't mean to say that we don't have to discipline. It doesn't mean to say that sometimes we don't have to call people out in synagogue, right? Or an action that's happening. But our attitude should be that first and foremost, let's pray for them. First and foremost, let's judge them favorably. That's our attitude. When we have such an attitude, then when we, God forbid, do have to do something, it's not God forbid, because if we do have to, that's what God wills. All right? But when we do have to do something, we'll do it in a much more sensitive way, and we'll make sure that it's the last resort. Because our attitude is an attitude of judging favorably. An attitude is that the same way we don't want other people to judge us not favorably, we want what happens to us to that person. And the attitude that we even pray for them, for those evildoers. We pray for them, just like our forefather Abraham Avinu. So if we work on that, right, then our whole attitude changes, and our ability to control ourselves from speaking evil. And we might not call it evil, but it is. It's lashon hara. It's bad talk. Even a little gossip here and there, or talking about someone else in a way that could be a little derogatory, even a tiny little bit. It'll be so much easier to hold ourselves back because our whole attitude changed. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm going to stop the recording.